The emergency sirens wailed across Cthar Prime as the modified fungal spores spread through the atmosphere. The towering plant-like Cthari citizens swayed in panic, their photosynthetic membranes already showing signs of the corruption. What had begun as a simple genetic modification experiment in their central agricultural dome had spiraled into an ecological catastrophe threatening their entire civilization. Evacuation routes are collapsing, reported Commander Jax to Admiral Serafina Rossi aboard the human flagship Resolute. The fungal growth is accelerating, blocking major thoroughfares. The Cthari leadership is fragmented, some factions refusing to board our vessels. Admiral Rossi, a veteran of 17 galactic crises, nodded grimly. Her weathered face betrayed no emotion, but her hands tightened around the command console. Deploy all available medical teams. Dr. Petrova's group has priority access to the central dome. We need to contain this at the source. Below on the planet's surface, Dr. Lena Petrova and her team worked frantically in hazmat suits, the fungal spores collecting on their visors like golden snow. 3 of her colleagues had already fallen, their suits compromised by the virulent organism. The Cthari had engineered this fungus to accelerate nutrient cycling in their crops. Instead, it had mutated, developing an insatiable appetite for the very cellular structures that made Cthari life possible. We need to release the counteragent across the entire northern hemisphere, Petrova instructed, her voice steady despite the chaos. Reynolds, chin is down. Take his dispersion packs. And the communication cut out as a massive fungal stalk crashed through the science facility's roof. When the emergency channels reopened hours later, humanity had lost 27 specialists, but Dr. Petrova's counteragent had worked. The Cthari species would survive. 3 weeks later, in the gleaming chamber of the Galactic Concord Council, Ambassador Marcus Thorne watched with barely concealed disgust as the Cthari representative, First Photosynthesis Jalanther, addressed the assembled delegates. The human intervention, while perhaps well-intentioned, has contaminated our pure biological systems with foreign elements. Jalanthar's translator device conveyed in the stilted, formal tones of diplomatic speech. Our traditional healers might have found a more harmonious solution had they been given time. We demand reparations for the ecological disruption caused by these alien chemicals and strict limitations on human activities within Cthari space henceforth. Thorne's eyes met Admiral Rossi's from across the chamber. 27 dead. Hundreds more psychologically scarred from witnessing the horrors of a dissolving ecosystem consuming sentient beings alive. And this was their thanks. Not for the first time, but perhaps more powerfully than ever before, Thorne felt a profound weariness settle into his bones. How many times had humanity extended its hand to the galaxy, only to have it not merely slapped away, but bitten to the bone? The Xantari-Quala resource conflict had nearly devolved into genocide until human peacekeepers established the buffer zone. The Cygnus X, one infrastructure collapse that human engineers had prevented from cascading into a sector-wide power failure. The evacuation ship Hope, lost with all hands trying to rescue Orions from their self-destructed mining moon. The human diplomats taken hostage during the Volscian-Ruthian border war negotiations. Always humans rushing in to fix problems created by other species' short-sightedness, greed, or incompetence. Always humans sacrificing their lives, resources, and technology. And always afterward criticism, accusations of interference, claims of power projection, allegations of cultural contamination. Human technology copied without acknowledgement. Human knowledge exploited without credit. Thorne felt something snap inside him. Not an explosive anger, but in a cold, clarifying certainty. He glanced down at his datapad, where a single message from Earth Central awaited his confirmation. Proceed with ultimatum? His finger pressed yes as he rose to address the council. Distinguished representatives of the Galactic Concord, he began, his voice steady and carrying an uncharacteristic finality. I appear before you today not to debate the Cthari claims, nor to defend the actions of Dr. Petrova's team, who, I might remind this council, gave their lives to prevent the extinction of an entire sentient species. Thorne tapped his console, and a holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber. A scrolling list of incidents, names, dates, casualties. This is the price humanity has paid for our membership in this Concord. These are our dead, our missing, our broken. These are the occasions, numbering in the thousands, where human intervention prevented collapse, conflict, or extinction among your peoples. The Volscian ambassador, Rathvor, rose in objection, his crimson scales flaring. This emotional display is silence. Thorne's command cut through the chamber with such authority that even the imposing Volscian faltered. You will listen now, because this may be the last time you ever hear a human voice in this chamber. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Humanity hereby issues a formal ultimatum to the Galactic Concord. You have one standard galactic cycle, approximately 1 Earth year, to meet the following conditions. First, a formal apology and reparations for human losses, particularly in the Cthar incident and others documented in the record I've provided. Second, the ratification of a new cooperation charter, ensuring fair distribution of military, economic, and scientific burdens, respect for intellectual sovereignty, and clear penalty mechanisms for violations of good faith. Third, the establishment of mandatory training programs to enable species to maintain the technologies they currently rely upon humans to provide and maintain. Should these conditions not be met, humanity will activate protocol severance. We will withdraw fully and permanently from the Concord and all associated spaces. The chamber exploded with voices, some outraged, some mocking, a few genuinely alarmed. Ambassador Vor's laughter cut through the din. An empty threat, Ambassador Thorne. Your species is too integrated, too dependent on the trade networks of the Concord. This political theater may play well to your domestic audience, but we all know humans cannot survive in isolation. Thorne simply smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. You mistake our cooperation for dependence, Ambassador. A common error among those who have grown comfortable with others solving their problems. As Thorne left the chamber, Admiral Rossi fell into step beside him. They don't believe us, she said quietly. No, Thorne agreed. They don't. Will Earth Central actually follow through? Thorne paused, looking back at the council chamber doors sliding closed behind them. The decision is made, Admiral. Encryption protocols are already being updated across all human networks. Contingency plans are being activated. The countdown has begun. In her laboratory aboard the research station Prometheus, Dr. Alara Vance watched the recording of Thorne's ultimatum with a mixture of resignation and relief. Her team had spent decades perfecting the hyperlane network that made galactic travel possible. A system that humanity largely maintained, but that every species had come to take for granted. She opened a secure channel to her team, scattered throughout the galaxy. Begin Protocol Aurora. Priority Alpha. Authentication Vance Theta 79. Across human space, preparations began in earnest. The next months unfolded in contrasting patterns. Within the Concord, debates raged without progress. Committees formed to study the human demands, only to dissolve in disagreements over basic terms. The Volscians and Signians quietly began positioning themselves to fill the power vacuum they believed would emerge when humans backed down from their bluff. Smaller species expressed concern, but found themselves drowned out by the dominant voices. Meanwhile, humanity worked with quiet, methodical purpose. Defense fleets around Sol and independent colonies underwent major upgrades. Secret hyperlane routes, known only to human navigators, were established and secured. Experts and scientists were gradually withdrawn from joint projects under the pretense of internal restructuring. Strategic reserves were established at key points in human space. The lives of ordinary humans throughout Concord space took on a melancholy rhythm. Military personnel saying final farewells to places they had defended. Scientists documenting research they would never complete. Colonists packing keepsakes from worlds they had called home. sometimes for generations. Small failures began appearing in the systems humans maintained. The hyperlane network experienced local disruptions as non-human maintenance crews proved unable or unwilling to follow human protocols properly. Trade began to slow. Border conflicts, once quickly resolved by human peacekeepers, simmered and occasionally boiled over. The asteroid early warning system, crucial for populated systems with dense asteroid fields, began issuing false alerts after a qualitechnician attempted to improve its algorithms without human guidance. At Nightingale Station in the Outer Rim, Dr. Karina Laini and her medical team faced a heart-wrenching dilemma. Their research into a cure for the Lyran plague was showing promising results, perhaps only months from a breakthrough, when the evacuation order arrived. The Lyran ambassador himself, his silver fur already patchy from the early stages of the disease, arrived unannounced at the station. "Please," he begged, all diplomatic pretense abandoned. "My people were wrong to oppose your presence in our system. We were foolish and prideful. But don't punish an entire species for the mistakes of a few politicians." Dr. Laini looked at the research samples her team was methodically destroying. "I would help if I could, Ambassador, but the decision isn't mine to make. All research data is being encrypted and returned to Earth. Perhaps someday." "There won't be a someday for many of us," the Lyran said quietly, turning to leave. The deadline approached. Emergency sessions of the Concord Council produced nothing but recriminations and posturing. A weak apology was offered, blaming circumstances rather than acknowledging specific failures. Half-hearted proposals for reform were put forward, laden with loopholes and lacking enforcement mechanisms. On the final day, Ambassador Thorne appeared via hologram before the council, his expression impassive. "The deadline has expired. The conditions have not been met. Protocol severance is now in effect. Farewell." The transmission ended before anyone could respond. What followed was a marvel of coordination and technological supremacy that left even humanity's critics in awe. The human fleet moved with synchronized precision, creating safe corridors for civilian evacuation while methodically deactivating military and civilian systems they had installed throughout Concord space. Nothing was fully destroyed, but all were rendered useless without human activation codes. Embassies and consulates closed simultaneously across thousands of worlds. Earth flags were lowered for the final time. Cities, bases, and space stations once bustling with human activity fell silent, their automated systems running final shutdown sequences. Some species reacted with outrage, attempting to prevent the withdrawal by force. These efforts were effortlessly neutralized by the human fleet, which demonstrated capabilities many in the Concord had never seen, proof that humanity had always held back its full military potential. Others responded with panic or desperation. Cygnian officials offered massive economic concessions. Orion elders invoked ancient friendship pacts. A few, including a faction of Cthari who opposed their government's position, attempted to leave with the humans, seeking asylum. These requests were considered case by case, with some granted. But the exodus continued without pause. The last human ships jumped into Sol space or independent colonial territories. The borders were sealed. Inside human space, there was order amid the adjustment, focused rebuilding, and the integration of returnees. Outside, chaos bloomed almost immediately. The hyperlane network failed catastrophically without human maintenance, stranding millions of travelers and cutting off vital supply lines. Automated systems, energy grids, atmosphere processors, medical facilities began cascading failures without proper maintenance. Cthar faced a second ecological disaster as the counteragent required ongoing adjustments they couldn't implement. Cygnus X, one experienced massive power outages. The galactic stock market collapsed. Corporations dependent on human technology or trade went bankrupt overnight. Security deteriorated as pirates, separatist factions, and aggressive species like the Volscians exploited the power vacuum. Attacks, looting, and territorial seizures occurred openly. The Concord security forces proved weak, uncoordinated, and technologically outmatched without human support. The Concorde itself, once the proud, unifying force of the galaxy, dissolved within months. The space it had encompassed fragmented into competing territories, lawless zones, and isolated systems struggling to survive. 27 years passed. Humanity flourished in isolation. Freed from the constant drain of resolving galactic crises, human innovation accelerated dramatically. Improved warp drives made travel within human space more efficient than ever. Advanced autonomous AI systems revolutionized production and research. Regenerative medicine extended human lifespans significantly. New colonies were established in unexplored regions far from the old Concorde, each one self-sufficient and connected to the whole. A new philosophy took hold among humans: self-reliance, resilience, non-intervention. The new generation grew up with the Concorde as merely a bitter historical lesson, something studied in schools but with the emotional distance of ancient history. Long-range monitoring systems remained active, observing former Concorde space, but no signals from that region received responses. The borders remained heavily defended, with automated warning systems destroying any vessels that approached without authorization. In what had once been Concorde space, civilization itself was in retreat. The once unified government had splintered completely, the territory divided between the struggling domains of once powerful factions. The Volscian hegemony and Cygnian combined chief among them. Though both faced internal strife, chaotic regions controlled by pirates or warlords, and isolated planets or systems trying to maintain some semblance of stability. Technology stagnated or regressed as knowledge was lost and infrastructure crumbled. Many species faced famine, disease, old illnesses returning or new ones emerging without treatment, and endless conflict. Average lifespans decreased dramatically across most populations. Scattered, desperate attempts to contact humanity continued. Distress calls and pleas sent blindly into space, none receiving responses. Some of these messages were detected by human monitoring systems, analyzed, logged, and archived without action. Then, at the farthest edge of what had once been Concorde space, something new appeared. They were first detected by an automated Volscian outpost. Massive geometric structures moving in ways that defied conventional physics, absorbing energy and matter, erasing star systems as they passed, leaving nothing behind. They did not communicate. They could not be stopped by any weapons the remaining species possessed. The Volscians designated them the nullifiers. The structures moved slowly at first, consuming uninhabited or chaotic regions where resistance was minimal. Then they accelerated, advancing into more organized territories. Panic spread as system after system went dark. The Volscian hegemony, once the most militarily powerful faction in the Concorde, deployed their entire fleet against a single nullifier structure. The battle lasted less than an hour. The Volscian ships were absorbed or disabled, their weapons having no discernible effect. The nullifier continued its advance unimpeded. On a dying space station at the edge of Cygnian space, a desperate alliance formed. Representatives of the remaining major species, Volscians, Cygnians, Cthari, Orions, and others, gathered in a final conclave. Ancient enemies sat side by side, united by existential terror. The nullifiers have consumed 37 star systems, reported the Cygnian data analyst, her voice mechanical even in crisis. Projected time until they reach the core worlds, 62 days. Our weapons are useless, growled the Volscian military commander, his scales dull with stress. The hegemony is lost. There is only one hope, said the ancient Orion elder, his tentacles trembling with age. The humans. A bitter laugh came from the Cthari representative. The humans who we drove away? Why would they help us now? Because they must, replied the Orion. Because despite everything, they were always the protectors of this galaxy. And because if the nullifiers consume us all, they will eventually reach human space as well. Together, they composed a final message, the most powerful transmission they could generate with their failing technology directed toward human space. The wording was desperate, acknowledging all past mistakes, calling humans the only true guardians, begging forgiveness and salvation from the advancing nullifiers. They promised anything, everything in return for intervention. The message traveled across the void for days before being intercepted by a human border monitoring station. It was analyzed, verified, and forwarded to Earth Central Command with the highest priority designation. In the gleaming chamber of the Terran High Command on Earth, President Ilara Vance II, daughter of the renowned Dr. Ilara Vance, who had helped design the human withdrawal decades earlier, reviewed the message and the accompanying data on the nullifiers with her military and scientific advisors. Our analysis confirms these nullifiers are an existential threat, reported Admiral Jian Li. They appear to be artificial constructs of non-biological origin, possibly extradimensional. Their technology far exceeds anything we encountered during the Concorde era. Are they a threat to human space? Asked President Vance. Not immediately. They're still far from our borders. However, their advance is accelerating. At current rates, they would reach our outer colonies in approximately 7 years. And our defensive capabilities? Our current technology could likely combat them effectively, but it would require full mobilization and would result in significant casualties. The best approach would be to stop them now, before they grow stronger by consuming more systems. President Vance turned to the communications display showing the desperate faces of the former Concorde species. They abandoned us when we needed them, left us to die countless times, only called for us when they needed fixing. Yes, Madam President, acknowledged Li. Those are the historical facts. And yet, millions of innocent beings face extinction. That is also true. The chamber fell silent as Vance stood, walking to the strategic display that showed human space, secure, prosperous, defended, and beyond it, the encroaching void represented by the nullifiers. My mother helped build the hyperlanes that once connected the galaxy, she said quietly. She also helped disconnect them when the Concorde betrayed us. She told me once that the hardest part wasn't the technical challenge. It was living with the knowledge of what would happen afterward. She turned to face her advisors. Did we make the right choice 27 years ago? Admiral Li met her gaze steadily. We chose survival and independence over continued exploitation. I believe history has vindicated that decision. And now? What is the right choice now? The question hung in the air, unanswered directly. Finally, Vance nodded, her decision made. Humanity owes the galaxy nothing more. We have paid our debt in full, with interest. She turned to her command console. Increase border defenses to maximum alert. All exploration fleets are to return immediately or divert well clear of former Concorde space. Shut down all communication channels and monitoring systems directed toward the Concorde remnant. And the distress call? Asked her communication officer. No response, Vance said firmly. Log it and archive it with the others. On the strategic display, the small window showing the advance of the nullifiers continued to update, red markers consuming star system after star system, including the space station where the final plea had originated. The president watched silently for a moment, then turned away. Close that feed. We have our own future to build. The display winked out, leaving only the secure boundaries of human space illuminated on the map. Beyond those borders, in the darkness where the galaxy's other species faced extinction, human attention would not return. The lessons had been learned. The decisions had been made. It was too late to fix what had been broken. Humanity had walked away from the galaxy, and they would not look back.